Hey friends, welcome back to this series of 20 days of Kronos configuration. Today is day number 6 and we're going to learn about auto-resolved exceptions. Prior to that, if you are new and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please click on subscribe and hit that bell button so that you get notified for my upcoming videos, and also please share your feedback in the comment section. Before I go into the application and get started with the configuration of auto-resolve exception, I would like to share some information about what auto-resolve exceptions are, what they do, and what are the different types of auto-resolve exceptions we have in the system. So let's get started. Day number 6, auto-resolve exceptions. Typically, when an employee is scheduled to work and the employee doesn't turn up, the system can be configured in such a way that we can create the auto-resolve exceptions, especially when an employee is scheduled to work and he doesn't clocks in or doesn't submit the time of request. So on that day when he is scheduled to work, there is no time of request submitted and there is no punch in as well. So there is nothing at all on that day. We can set up the system in such a way that by default we can create an auto-resolve exception to resolve those missing time. And the missing time includes late in, early out, long break, core hour violation, and unexcused absence. These are the 5 types of, so to speak, auto-resolve exception that we can set up in the system. And let me just give you a brief information about what these are. And in this day 6, we're going to see how to create auto-resolve exceptions. So I'm going to show you 2 ways in the system how to set up the auto-resolve exception. And both of them can be used depending on the requirement. Now, the first one is late in. So if an employee is supposed to come at around 9 in the morning, but he comes at 9:30, so we can use that missing time from 9 to 9:30 to generate an auto-resolve exception. Likewise, if an employee is supposed to leave at 5, but he leaves early, 30 minutes early, so that 30 minutes can be tracked. Okay, that 30 minutes can be tracked. Likewise, if somebody takes a long break and somebody has a core hour violation, and the most commonly used one is unexcused absence. So the unexcused absence is the one where you do not have any punch or you do not have any time of request submitted by the employee, so there is no in and out time, and the system will generate an exception called as unexcused absence. So this is, out of these, the most commonly used ones that you will come across is the unexcused absence, and we will see how to create these as well in a while from now. And I've given one example as well here, that is if an employee is scheduled to work from 12 to 4 and then from 5 to 9, and if the schedule time is 8 hours, any deviation in this schedule time will be considered as missing time. If he comes late, leaves early, takes a long break, okay, so we can set up these missing time by configuring the auto-resolve exceptions. These are something that if you're working on a project, your clients will not typically tell you, but they may say something like, if an employee doesn't work on a day when he's supposed to work, there should be an unpaid pay code that will we should be sending an unpaid code to the payroll. They may not typically say that we should have an auto-resolve exception set up. This is something you as a Kronos consultant should know which requirement or which configuration is required for what type of requirement. So with that note, let's go into the setup, into the application, and see how we can create this configuration. Again, as I said, I'm going to show you 2 different ways of creating auto-resolve exception. It's pretty much the same, but there will be a slight variation in the way I'm going to do both of them. So let's go into the application and get started with how to set up these auto-resolve exceptions. Alright, here we are. Let's go into our work rule building block right here. So here we are, auto-resolve exceptions. Slowly we are moving towards our goal of creating the payrolls. And prior to the auto result exception, which we are going to see today, we've covered all of these: break rule, core hours exception, shift guarantee, punch round rule, interval round rule. So if you haven't had a chance to go through this, I'm going to put the playlist link for day 1 to day 5 in my description. And we've also seen definitions on day 1, which we are going to revisit today as well. Now, to create the auto result exception, I'm going to give you all the steps. So if you're making notes, make sure you make a note of the steps. So this is what we're going to set up today: auto result exception. But like as I always do, I would like to show you a world without auto result exceptions. Now again, these are exceptions. As you can see, it says auto result exceptions. So if we go to the time card, so this is the typical time card of an employee. Now if you look at the time card, the employee is scheduled to work. This is the employee schedule, but these are the dates when he has no punches at all, and neither there are any pay codes or time of request submitted. So by default, the system generates exception called as unexcused absence. However, if on a typical day when employee works, for example, the employee has worked his scheduled time, so you will not see any of these exceptions, right? So you see that there is no exception here. However, if the employee doesn't work and doesn't submit any time of request, that's when the system automatically generates this auto resolve, or rather unexcused absence. And by using auto resolve exception, we can generate a pay code for those missing time. So as of now, there are no times, no requests submitted. So we, using the auto resolve exception, can generate can generate a pay code for those missing hours. For example, your client might say that, as I said earlier, if the employee doesn't punches in for that day, we should be sending to the payroll loss of pay, right? So that means you need to have a pay code generator automatically called, let's say, unpaid or loss of pay, and that pay code will be sent to the payroll when you run the payroll export file. So that is the purpose of auto resolve exception. At the same time, if, as I said, if an employee is supposed to work from 12 to 9, but he comes late, let's say he comes at 1 p.m. So from 12 to 1, his time is not captured. So by using auto resolve exception, we can track those 1 hour of missing time from 12 to 1. Now you may think that why we need to track that 1 hour. It's fine, he's still working, right? He's working, may not be working from 12 to 9, but he's still working from 1 to 10, right? So why do we need to track that 1 hour? Well, it again depends on your company policy, or maybe the HR would want to run a report to track the unproductive hours. Again, remember, 12 to 1, he has lost 1 hour, so that's like unproductive hours to the company. He was supposed to work for those 1 hour. So the company HR can run a report by using the pay code that will generate using the auto resolve exception, let's say late in. So at the end of the month, they can run a report with the pay code late in, and they will see, let's say you have 1,000 employees, and out of the 1,000 employees, maybe 55 employees came in late, so 55 hours are lost. So they can take some disciplinary action because it's an expense to the organization if you're missing out on the productive hours. So auto resolve exception can help the business or to the client to run a report and see for missing hours, so that they can take appropriate steps as need be. That being said, let's go into the setup. Now you know what happens if there is no auto resolve exception and why the auto resolve exception is right here in the setup. In the setup, we have auto resolve exceptions. Now when I click on new, you will notice that the ones that we discussed earlier, like late in, early out, long break, core hours, and unexcused absence, these are the ones that we we can create auto resolve exceptions for. Now, as you can see here, it says default duration pay codes. That means auto resolve exception is actually using a duration pay code. For that reason, the first step that you will be creating is you will be creating a duration pay code. Now, if you do not remember, or if you haven't had a chance to go through my day 1 tutorial, which is all about pay codes, you can go through that, because we spoke about how to create pay codes, but we're going to revisit that again now because we have to create the duration pay code. So let's go back to our pay policies, and right here is our definition where we can create our pay codes. And remember, we are going to create a pay code for auto resolve exception, and in auto resolve exception we can only use duration pay code. By now you may remember that there are 3 types of pay codes. One is standard pay code, duration pay code, and cascading pay code. The one that we're going to create is the duration pay code, and I give the name as loss of pay. So if an employee doesn't, if there is any missing time, let's take an example for unexcused absence. So the pay code that should generate is loss of pay because he didn't turn up for that day. So I am just going to use, you can use anything that you want, like unpaid or loss of pay or unexcused absence for that matter. Now I've selected duration pay code because if you do not select duration pay code, when we go into the auto resolve exception, you will not find this pay code. So for that reason, you need to enter or select the radio button duration pay code. The other important thing, and the most common mistake that I have seen in the past whenever I work with our junior consultant, is they do create auto resolve exception. They do create the duration pay code rather, and when they go to the auto resolve exception here, they do not find this pay code. Now the reason for that is, though you created a duration pay code, you might not find that pay code in the auto resolve exception. The reason is you need to select this checkbox which says use for auto resolve exception. So if you are making a note, kindly make a note of this very important point, that you need to put a check mark on this. If you do not put a check mark, then when you go to auto resolve exception, though you have created a duration pay code, you will not be able to see the loss of pay or whatever pay code that you are creating in the auto resolve exception. So you are telling the system that, hey, this loss of pay duration pay code, we are creating this so that we can use it in the auto resolve exception. Again, this one is the most common mistake that I've seen, which I would like you not to do so. So click on the check box there so that we can use this for auto resolve exception. That is it. I'm going to click on save and return. So that's the step number 1, create your duration pay code. So once you're done, click on save and return. Now let's go back to our, so your duration pay code is created. Now let's go to your auto resolve exception. Let's go ahead and click on new, and I'm going to give the same name as loss of pay, and we'll take an example of unexcused absence. So the duration pay code that we've created can be used for any of these situation, whether you're using for early out, long break, core hours, for any situation. We are going to use for unexcused absence. This is the most commonly used one. So loss of pay. Again, as I told you, if you do not use the check box there, then this pay code will not be shown in the definitions. All right. So I've created the step number 2, auto resolve exception, and I'm going to click on save and return. So right here is your loss of pay that we just created. Now this is step number 2. Step number 3, whatever we've created, we're going to assign that in our work rule. So let's go into a work rule and click on the one that you want to assign it into. And here you see the auto resolve exception. Select the one that you just created, update the version, and save this. Now once you save this, we're going to test this out in the time card. So if you remember, we did 3 steps. For the first step was we created the definition. In this we created the pay code. Then we assigned that duration pay code in auto resolve exception. Step number 2. Step number 3, we assigned the one that we just created in the work rule. Now we're going to test this in our time card. So let's do a refresh. There you go. Now you see loss of pay. This is the duration pay code that we just created, right? So this is exactly how the duration pay code can be used in order to track the missing hours. Now, as a HR admin or a payroll admin, I can anytime run a report, or I can track this by using the loss of pay, and I will know how many employees are there out of the 1,000 employees who have this pay code, so I will know that they have this missing time. Now, the other way I was telling you, right, at the beginning I told you there are 2 ways. I will show you how to create the auto resolve exception. This is the one way where you can see the auto resolve exception on your main time card. However, if you look at the pay code that gets generated, it's a system generated pay code, so to speak, which is regular, which may not give you the ability to send this loss of pay of 45 hours to the payroll, because regular is a pay code which typically is generated when you work your normal schedule hours. So for that reason, the other way that you may want to, there may be a couple of more steps that you may have to do in order to get the right pay code here in the totals as well. So that, because this is the pay code that we send to the payroll in the payroll export file, in the outbound file to your payroll vendor from the Kronos application, so we cannot send the regular pay code. For that reason, we may need to add a couple of more steps. So what we need to do is we need to create a PCD, pay code distribution. I'll talk about this more when we go up the ladder, but for now I'm going to quickly show you how we can have the loss of pay or LOP pay code here as well. For that, I'm going to create a new pay code. And this will not be a duration pay code, but this will be a simple pay code that we're going to create, so that we can assign this in the and I'm going to name it as LOP, and we're going to keep it as hours, standard and hours. Save and return. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a pay code distribution. The reason is so that this pay code that gets generated, this is getting generated from the system, the default pay code that is there. Now we're going to replace this regular with another pay code called LOP, loss of pay, and for that we need to use something called as pay code distribution. I'll give more details on this when we go cover later, but for now, while we are doing auto resolve exception, we're going to use this pay code distribution, and I'm going to name it as let's give it a name, let's say loss of pay. And here you see there is a default. So what pay code do we want to see in the total section? We want to see the LOP. That's the one that we want to see. We do not want to see a regular. So I'm going to click on save and return. And then I'm going to create a new work rule so that we can assign this PCD in that particular work rule that we, in the new PCD that we created, we're going to assign that here. So I'm going to name it as loss of pay, and in the pay code distribution I'm going to assign the loss of pay here as well. So this PCD has our pay code called LOP, and we assign that PCD in our work rule. And what we're going to do with this work rule, we're going to go back to our definitions and assign this work rule in the duration pay code right here. Okay, so you see there is a work rule. So the work rule that we just created, which has the PCD or pay code distribution, and that pay code distribution has the LOP pay code. So now this loss of pay is already included in a main pay code, or rather main work rule. I'm just going to associate that with another work rule which has our pay code, which we want to see in the time card because we do not want to see regular. So I'm going to save it, save and return. Now let's go to the time card and do a refresh. There you go. Now did you see the difference? Previously it was regular, but now it is LOP. So because you are unexcused absence, you do not have any, you have missing punch, the system has generated a loss of pay, and because of that we have this LOP pay code. Again, you can give it as any name that you want. You can give it as loss of pay as well, or you can give, I didn't give loss of pay because the pay code name should be unique, so you can either give unpaid, or you can give unexcused absence, or you can just simply give it as absent as well, whatever you want or whatever your client would want to see. Alright, and then you can now send this LOP pay code to your payroll vendor as well. Now if you want to have a quick recap of what we did, initially we created 3 steps. Step number 1 was to create a pay code, duration pay code, and when you create a duration pay code, always remember to put a check mark on the auto resolve exception. If you do not do that, then you cannot use this in the auto resolve exception. So once you create a duration pay code, you go into your auto resolve exception and you can use those duration pay code in any of these for that matter. We selected unexcused absence, right? So here I've selected. The third step was to assign this directly in the work rule. But before that, you can also, just to make sure you get the right pay code, you can use the pay code distribution. You can create a pay code distribution, create a new work rule, and assign that work rule in your duration pay code, so that that pay code, what you want to see here will be associated in that particular work rule, which is already assigned in our duration pay code right here. So here is our work rule, which contains the PCD, which has our LOP pay code. So that is how you can use the auto resolve exception. A pretty useful, I would say, building block, which can help you to track the missing hours. And again, as I said, the client might not directly tell you which one to use, but based on the requirement, you need to come up with this as a solution to their requirement. And we've used unexcused absence. Now you can also get rid of this by using some options in the pay code definition itself, so that you don't get to see this exception, or because these are the system generated one, that's why you still see this unexcused absence, because these are system generated one. So I hope that you found this tutorial informative. If you have any feedback or any questions, please put that down in the comment section. And if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and also hit that like button, and do share this with any of your friends who are also interested in learning Kronos. Till next time, take care of yourself, and I will see you all soon. Thank you for watching till the end.